Okay, I think we are recording. Welcome everybody to, I think it's episode 12 of the Scholar Gypsies, and we have a real Scholar Gypsy today. Aidan Killian, comedian, storyteller, and coach of storytelling too. I first came across Aidan. Somebody gave me Aidan's name when I was running an event down in Doolin last March. And I had a look on his website and I said, "Oh my God, this guy's a professional comedian. He's never gonna come. He's never come down to our gig." But lo and behold, he came down, entertained 150 or 160 people free, because, as you know, anything I'd organized back then was, everybody did it. Everybody gave of their time for that event. And Aidan very kindly came from Dublin, Doug, I think, and came down for the weekend and really put a smile on people's faces after the lockdown. Now, I suppose my first question to Aidan, and some people may be aware of this and some people may not that watch this channel. Aidan did a very unique, it was genius what he did, is he went and did comedy gigs in every single county in Ireland during the lockdown. Sometimes 5 or 6 people in people's back kitchens, sometimes 60 or 70 people, and brought a light and a smile at a time that was very dark. So I suppose my first question, Aidan, and welcome, is where was the inspiration? Where did you get that idea from? Because I really did think when I heard it, it was ingenious.
Well, I suppose, Jerry, I wasn't really performing at that time as much as I used to. I had my own festival in Asia. I own my own bar, which is a comedy club. The Mary Line in Singapore is only full-time comedy club, full-time performance venue even. We have music and writers or poets. So we had like any like a little theatre show. It was really beautiful. And it was just, starting to make money. It was starting to be very successful. And I watched, the COVID thing happen in Asia first, started there. And I saw them closing down venues and, measuring the distance from one table to the other and fining people $10,000 if it was X amount of inches too close to the other. All this nonsense. And, I also watched, not everybody was dropping dead like in the videos. So, but what could I do? They closed down the business, and then I was in Ireland. Then in Ireland, you weren't allowed to do anything. You weren't allowed as a performer. There was no bars, there's no venues. You couldn't perform anymore. So it kind of gave me an opportunity to remind myself, well, what am I doing? I used to be an investment banker once. And I left that because I wasn't interested in money. Yeah, I like money. I like abundance. I like having enough, but I don't need hundreds of millions. Yeah, it'd be nice, but the idea of staying in that bank didn't motivate me enough to do that. And I thought, okay, well, I'll do comedy because I love it. But then I got lost in the producing, and it was like becoming money again. So I was like, well, I'm a performer. That's who I am. I want to share ideas. I want to share feelings and make people laugh and share laughter together on stage. That's where I find the most joy in life. That's where I'm nearly most me, when I'm really connecting on stage. I really feel connected to the world in moments, not every time. Not last night. Not last night. But anyway, so I said, look, so we're not allowed. What does that mean? We're not allowed. Like, they're talking about 5 kilometers and whatever restrictions, and you're not allowed. They're not giving the venues, like the venue, they took my license from me, for example, for the company in Singapore. So we weren't able to, but you can't stop someone moving into your house and performing. You can't stop. I mean, you can turn up, I suppose, with weapons and beat them up or imprison people. But ultimately, they can't revoke a license. There were just guidelines. And I thought, well, surely there's people like me in Ireland who don't buy into this, are not sure. At the time, I wasn't sure. I didn't know any more than anyone, Jerry. I just felt it's not for me. I looked at the evidence that I had and I was like, okay, maybe not. I'm not convinced, but what I am convinced of is I do have a right to wear what I want on my face. I do have a right to travel freely. We have a proclamation of independence. We have a constitution. I've read that we have inalienable rights. That's within us. And I could feel something very wrong with it. There's something very malevolent about the whole thing. I said, I'm not getting caught in that. I'm not sitting in there watching Netflix. I'm not going to be fighting with my family about not wearing a face covering or not taking a thing or doing any of that. I just said, right, I'm doing my thing. So I put up on Facebook, I said, I will perform anywhere in Ireland for anyone who invites me to perform. And there was I think 24 people in the first day, reached out to me and said, yeah, come on over. And I went all over, Kerry and Donegal and places I'd never even been, like Fermanagh. And, there's some counties up north that I don't know much about, to be honest with you. And I got to see they took me to the sites, the sacred sites in their area. They introduced me to their friends and their family. And at first it was brutal, Jerry. There might be like, our neighbor, someone called the cops on one of our neighbors last week. So we want to be quiet. Could you park on a different road? And there was this stuff, which I get. Nobody wants to have they don't want to upset their neighbors. And they just want to be able to invite their friends and their family who are also asking questions and to have an excuse to gather, to be able to share a drink and a laugh and a bit of entertainment. And I loved it. And it brought me right back into performing. And, within maybe 3 or 4 or 5 shows, it became a show. The new show was about what I saw in Kerry, what I saw in Cork. And the show developed right at the start. It was about, okay, so there was the rules and the playing with the rules. And then later on, it was like, I met a mechanic and he told me his sister-in-law died at 36 a week after the thing. And then the next day I met someone else and his auntie lost eyesight after the thing. And then she was considering getting the second thing. And she was worried about losing the eyesight in another eye. And it was like, is this happening? This was raw, Jerry. It was just happening. They just released the thing, right? And I was seeing it firsthand, people telling me stories, because the ones who were most awake were often the ones who had immediate impact in their life. Their father or their mother or their grandmother or their neighbor, they've seen it. There was people crying at my shows afterwards because their parent or someone were dead, right? Well, I took up smoking again. I hadn't smoked in 5 years. I was rolling just to deal with the, everyone's and fear. And people had the fear as well, the New World Order and the Great Reset and nothing. And I didn't have any answers. All I knew is I had a show that I made related to the time. It was storytelling and it was uplifting and it was beautiful and it was about being free within. And I was just sharing that show and I'd listen to whatever anyone said, without accepting it as fact and without sharing anything that I knew as fact, except that I'm not participating. I'm not. You guys do what you want. I'm not participating in that. And you guys can arrest me if you like, which there was cops now and again, by the way. That's a different story. But anyway, we made it through. We had a laugh and I met a lot of great people. So.
Yeah, no, and that's the sense. That's the sense I've had as well. Especially when you say the inalienable rights. I think that's the thing that the most people I meet resonated with. That the government or the state entities kind of decided that they could play around with your inalienable rights and that they weren't actually inalienable. They were in possession of them. And I suppose that was the first big thing, because like that now, I would, believe what you want, but I'm not participating at this moment in time. And in the beginning, I make no bones about it. I was like, well, this doesn't feel right. We'll wait and see what happens. Maybe I'm wrong. But, that the day, and even if you take it right up to yesterday, I see the big shiny redhead, baldy redhead is rolling out 18 to 49-year-old vaccine boosters again. And I'm like,
in his defense, in the Minister of Health's defense, you see, it's not his fault, Jerry, because you see, when he was young, right, he had to go to school with that head. You know what it's like, an all-boys school. Imagine being in an all-boys school with that. egghead. You know, imagine what they called him back then. They were probably pulling his pants over his head, rolling him down the hill, and he was there going, "Oh, when I'm older, well, I'm going to be the Minister of Health, and I'm going to vaccinate. I'm going to take your children, and you'll all be getting myocarditis. That's my revenge." Isn't it amazing that some like ex-ranger, not to be talking violence, but I really do think about this. Isn't it amazing that someone who's just like, you know, like a ranger, a Navy SEAL, like if in V for Vendetta, just doesn't come out and start like assassinating these. I'm just waiting for the day that some, you know, I don't know.
Oh
ninja
God! Well, I can tell you the thing.
vendetta.
I would get very much the sense that Ireland will be the last place anything like that. Not that I'm condoning any of that, but you know, the hypnosis seems to be very strong here still, is the way you might phrase it. So, so
It is and it isn't. Like, you know, I think a lot of people are now, like the most hypnotized people are now kind of, like, and I even ask the audiences sometimes, because I do gigs to normal audiences, you know, the ones that I love most are like a gig like your one, whereas people are actively questioning and, you know, they're really interested in what's going on, and they possibly see that there's the whole thing was used as an excuse to control and ultimately to take people's assets, you know, to take the country's wealth, to, you know, so people can own nothing and be happy or whatever, to be enslaved. So those people are the best audience because they're really into what I do, and I'm very free on stage. But me talking about, you know, traveling, you know, breaking the COVID regulations to a normal audience, their initial, you know, response might not be positive. So they think, oh, you're a granny killer or whatever. So it's harder to make someone laugh if they hate you or they, you know, they don't like what you're standing for. So I have to find a middle ground there creatively, which I've been playing with. You know, I have some stuff that's not too controversial, but I try and honor who I am as well. And you know, I noticed that like last night, for example, I did some, you know, COVID stuff at the start, and I could really feel the tension in the room. And I had them ish, but never fully. I forget why I started that sentence.
No, but
I said it. Sorry, Jay. Because often I ask the audience, and it used to be like 80-20. This is not my audience. This is a comedy audience. 80% would be, you know, they think it's very serious, and then 20% would think absolute bullshit. And it changes on the area. Southside Dublin are the ones who believe most. They believe, no, the government would not lie to us. They have the intellectuals, and Luke O'Neill has lots of degrees, and he went to Trinity, and he knows best, and we don't need to think about anything. And they'd be the ones in the taxis going, excuse me, Mr. Taxi Driver, there's a hole in your mask. Could you tighten it? Whereas, you know, from like Tala, Clondalkin, West, anything outside North Side Dublin, people have a lot more cop on. They didn't buy into it as much. They're like, I'm not wearing that. They're not having it. So I think, and Dublin are always they're the dumbest, whatever. I mean, I've been around Ireland. They are always the dumbest. The bigger the city, the dumber the people. I don't know what that is. Maybe it's the lack of nature. But whatever. Well, anyway, my point is now it's 50-50. If I ask the audience, usually I'm getting about 50% of people who don't really, you know, they're at least suspicious. So I see that as hope.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. You brought up two things there that I kind of wanted to tie in together and maybe ask a question. Is obviously you referenced South Dublin, and you're referencing, you know, getting back to the normal comedy scene and gigs. One of the disappointments for me in the whole era, even now going into the future, is the disappointment that the arts sector have been in all of this. And I don't just mean comedians, I mean like a whole range of people in the who you would have thought would have questioned things, you know, questioned things really hard and would have in the recent history. How was the reaction to you? Because obviously you know, you wear your heart on your sleeve as to what you're, you know, what you believe and what you're doing. How did your peers react? How's that reaction been with your peers?
You know, it hasn't been great, Jerry. I don't, I mean, a lot of them just ignored it, looked the other way, didn't want to know. I just thought, oh, he's being a weirdo or a conspiracy theorist, or he's lost his mind, or he's just looking for attention. You know, But that's kind of the way it works. First you'll ridicule them, you'll ignore them, you'll ridicule them. Then begrudgingly, if that person holds on to truth long enough, you begrudgingly accept them. And then you turn a perceived enemy into a friend, because eventually the truth will be there long enough and they'll go, wow, well done, you did that. So the reaction I've got hasn't been great. And they're just like, some comedians won't gig with me.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There was a lot of mean comments on social media at the start, because they bought in. Not that many, but some of them really, really invested in this. And don't forget, a lot of comedians they're not very successful. I mean, most of them aren't, so they don't have a lot of money. So 350 a week, they've kind of been bought off there. There's money to do nothing. And isn't it easier to think, oh, look, this is very serious, I'll sit back and take the money, rather than going, well, something's up, I should do something. I think most of them don't care. They just kind of like, yeah, whatever, he's doing his thing. They don't hold it against me. But there are comics out there who've never gigged for me. And I even tested the water. I even paid them over the odds just to see what would go on. And the only reason I can think they'd be annoyed at me are my views, because there's nothing else. There's like, I don't really get it. Anyway, I'm disappointed in my hero, Tommy Tiernan, who I love, absolutely love, on and off stage. I think he's just amazing, but he never said anything. And he's like the Roy Keane of comedy. He's someone who people listen to, people respect. And if he didn't say anything, if he did say something, I suppose the rest of the lemmings would have followed suit, But who else has a follow-on? I mean, Andrew Maxwell, right? There's a guy, right, who's got a bit of a following. He fully believes the other narrative. If you don't wear a mask, you're endangering people. And I gigged with him recently, and he was really funny. He's the opposite side of what I had, but he was wearing his heart on his sleeve, because not everybody liked what he was saying. Some people left. He was pushing the jab in one of the jokes, and people left. But at least he stood by his views, and I found it funny. Like, I didn't think I'd get to laugh at it, but I actually found it funny because he did it well. Whereas, I don't know, like.
Well, I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem with people that genuinely believe what they're saying. But I would have said, yeah. Well, I would take your word that he did. He does. But I'd have Tommy Tiernan's maybe 2 years older than me, so I know. I don't mean I know him, but I've been following him since I was in university in Galway, and he was on the dole, and he was this. You could be guaranteed he would stick the knife in if he thought where it needed to be, or say the thing that couldn't be said.
And he's too smart not to know.
He's too smart not to have questions. He's too smart not to have questions, is the way I'd put it. But I suppose, that was, and he was, like, I suppose he's one of the people that I had in mind as well, because he had, he'd have got a lot of people to ask questions of themselves. And, and as time has gone on, it's quite obvious that they weren't, and none of these people were correct on the basis just on the pure basis as that it didn't work. You don't have to. That's not conspiracy. That's just. I'm sorry, it didn't work.
And you can look at the Central Statistics Office. You can look at the stats, and even if all that, even if it did work hypothetically, still the idea of discriminating against one human from another, you'd still need to be asking questions of yourself there. Eating your steak dinner there in Ranelagh, and sipping your Rioja wine while the other people aren't allowed in. My mum wasn't allowed in. All her friends were allowed places, and she couldn't go. She just had to stay at home on her own. And I remember feeling so sorry for her. It didn't affect me because I could go out. I knew people in every county in Ireland I could hang out with. But some people had absolutely no one.
No, that's one of the that event we had in Doolin. Like, I didn't know what was going to happen at that for the weekend. But the first woman that spoke gave it, it was...
That's not how you pitched it to me. It's going to be this great event. There'll be wonderful from all over Ireland. Oh, you have to be there. And now I hear the truth. I have no idea.
That's true. But what the first woman was a woman called Grace Wells. She was a poet, but she gave a speech. She gave a talk on censorship historically in Ireland and kind of comparing to what went on during the period of time we were in. But afterwards, just these women started just standing up and telling their stories about how hurt they were by a brother or a parent, and they were the emotion of it. And I remember reflecting at the time with my own family was we were the kind of family that were always arguing, always kind of comfortable arguing with each other. So we were never going to fall out. We never fall out over something like this. So or we'd never be kind of rejected. So I got a sense I was lucky, but I also got a sense that these were people who were genuinely never had a problem with siblings or parents or friends in their life until this issue. And I thought to myself, isn't that horrendous that our government would do that to people, and that people would kind of allow, accept it? Because I think as much as we'll move on from this subject now, but as much as people want to close their eyes to what happened there is a deep divide, and I don't think the people that were part of it understand what they did and how much kind of pain they caused and how much reconciliation work needs to be done to get over it for a lot of people. So
it's a funny one because there was a funeral, the COVID regulations killed my grandmother, and at the funeral, there was talk of my uncle wouldn't get in the room with anybody who wasn't vaccinated, and whatever. It wasn't a big controversy over it. I wasn't taking any bait, I'm not taking any of that. But I was doing the reading in the church. Yeah, not the reading, the what do you call it when somebody?
Oh, you were saying, yeah, were you giving the homily about him?
Yeah, I was doing the homily, right? And it was fascinating because we were allowed X amount of people in the church. I think it was 50 at the time. And I wasn't, I was just trying not to argue with them all, but also just hold onto my state of sovereignty. And, I will be doing it. And they said, well, are you going to wear a mask in the church? And I said, well, why are you asking me that question? And they go, well, you have to. And I said, what did you say to me? And I just let them to try and repeat the language. You have to. Of course I didn't, wear a mask, and I did it. And no one says anything except afterwards the priest, said it was, one of the best homilies he's ever heard. And it's like, what is this? You don't have to have 50. It's a recommendation. The priest is probably not going to care. You might get the odd one who loves a bit of power. But we for me, it was fascinating, because this Christmas, my uncle, we never thought about it because it's just not spoken about. But I noticed he gave a little present to my daughter, my 3-month-old daughter. And I thought that was a nice touch. I don't know if that was his nice way of acknowledging or apologizing or not, but it's nothing's been said. It's never been addressed. There's been no apologies. I don't need any groveling or anything, but it would be nice to be able to have a calm, open conversation. Guys, this is what happened. How do you feel about that? If something like this happened again, what could we do better as a family?
Because I think you're right. Because what I find is, and we've moved in, 2022 has been a totally different year for other reasons, we'll say. But what you find happening, and I think this is the problem with a comedian as well, maybe not addressing stuff, is your self-censored conversations between these two camps are now self-censored. Is you don't have a conversation about something because if I bring that up now, it's going to be a problem or somebody's going to get upset, and you end up like there's a number of subjects that have happened in 2022, whether it's the war, whether it's climate change, whether it's the transgender stuff. And I do notice that the people that, if you like, got the vaccine passport question wrong, because I do think the passport no one, 100% of Irish people should have rejected the passport. And that for me was the trigger point, really. If you want to jab yourself, go for it. But
can I interject you there quickly, Jerry? Just hold that thought. We did myself and two very talented artists, Tiernan O'Rourke, the piano player, and Stephen Murphy, the poet. We climbed mountains, 32 mountains in 32 days, the highest point in Ireland, our spiritual point in Ireland. We did Galway, Diamond Hill, and we had these bars, a male and a female pole, and we put the two together so it worked like an antenna, and we put the Erin Gabra flag up there with the harp and the goddess Erin on the top, as if to call on, God, to strike down, these little antennas and with lightning and to wake up the people of Ireland so we'd stop this madness, right? Okay, it was a long shot, but they were talking about again. And anyway, at the end of it, when we finished, they opened up the country, so you're welcome. But in Galway, we came down and this is proper Connemara. We saw a proper Connemara pub, and we went in and we could see there was a few people with the face coverings on their chin and that, so they weren't taking it too seriously, which is what we were hoping for, because these were the rebels. This is the descendants of the people who rebelled against the crown, the ones that lived. So we thought that maybe we'll be okay. We went in, ordered 5 pints and 5. This after a big 4-hour hike, 4 pints and 4 soups. And one goes, yeah, Grant, can I see your certs? And Tiernan said, you don't need to see any certs here. And she went, oh, okay. And she walked off, and I thought, great. Then she came back with the manager, and the manager said it again. Look, lads, I need to see your QR codes or whatever. And I said, listen, we're just trying to get some, 4 pints, 4 soups, and then we'll leave. We're just, we're not causing any trouble. They said, I can't serve you without them. And the people beside us looked over, saw the commotion, and put their masks on. You know what I mean? Dirty looks through their eyes. And then we had to leave. It was either that or start a fight. You know what I mean? What are you going to do? Break the place up? There's no violence necessary. So we leave. He said he'd serve us outside. This is what they did in the past. No Catholics, no Jews, no black people, whatever they chose, whoever they hated or despised or had least respect for, they put outside. And we were put outside. And we were outside, cold and wet, after a long hike, having the pints, a little bit upset, talking about it. And those same people came over and closed the window. So they wouldn't be near us. And that's when I realized, yeah, there are pricks all over the world. And now they have the certs to prove it.
Yeah,
sorry, I interrupted you, but that's I like that. I just really like that idea. The certs to prove it thing. That's brutal. And my family, it was more like family. I was using my dad's cert because I wanted to go to some gig, and the bouncer goes, "Excuse me, Malcolm, are you? It says here you're 78 years old." And I said, "Correct." And he goes, well, I don't think you're 78. I said, mate, listen, I'm not really interested in your opinion. It is what it is. It is what it is. I'm looking good for my age. I'm a good guy anyway. I had to fucking win the honor to get in.
Yeah, and Connemara is a surprise because I was down from Tuam, pretty familiar with Connemara as being a wild and kind of, the people out there question things like, and they have no great graw for the state, historically, but there is actually, I think a common person is Jean Crowley that is out there.
Yeah, I love Jean. Yeah, I stayed with her that night.
Yeah, because at least there are a few kind of heretics here and there, because but again, like I suppose getting back to I suppose moving on slightly from all that stuff, what is 2022? What's captured your imagination about the year that's gone by?
Jerry, I'd imagine I was at one of those protests, and I hate protests. I'll be honest with you. I didn't even go because I just hate them. But I went because I was doing the touring, and people kind of knew me. I've never been famous. I'm not really on social media, but people in our circles went, that's the fella who wouldn't get, you know, the PCR test. I just wanted to travel home to Ireland. I wasn't having a PCR test. You're not sticking anything in any of my orifices, right? I wouldn't even let my girlfriend do that. Maybe if it was her birthday, right? But the point is, I'm not, you know, you're not doing that to me, right? That's it. And they could arrest me. They could do what they want, but I wasn't having it. Long story short, I couldn't get into the country. I couldn't get on the plane, couldn't get on the boat, but I was recording it. So people were watching it. Some people around the world were watching it to see how they could get home. And long story short, I had to go on a truck. I had to smuggle myself back into my own country. That's when you see there's something really wrong. But for me, I was pointing out what's going to happen. This was pre you know, thing time. So I was like, this is the next step. And there's certs and everything. So anyway, I went to the protest just to kind of smile and nod at the people I met along the way. And I felt it was the right thing to do, even though for whatever reason I find it hard to, maybe I should be a bit more, you know, motivated. But then I see this woman at a protest. I even got my mum to come with me, first protest ever, because it was the discrimination of human beings at that particular one. And I saw this woman who I'd seen before at one of the shows, and she was dressed like a cat. She turned it into a festival atmosphere. There was dancing. It wasn't just the shame, shame, shame. I think that's what upsets me. I don't like the shame, shame. I don't like that energy at the protest. But I do like part of the protest. It's just that it's never really led or directed in a way that leads to an impact that I'm happy with, and I feel we've achieved something. I feel we just wander around and do nothing. You know, I'm not saying we should break stuff or something, but it has to be some goal that's achieved. And when it's not, I leave feeling more apathetic. So anyway, I went up to her and I approached her and I asked her out badly. And she said, yeah, we went on a date to Pat Noon's Fairy Farm in Galway. There was a fertility rock there. She sat on the rock. We had a great time. A week later, she moved in with me. We did 40 days, no kissing, no touching, no alcohol, no coffee, no anything, to see what it's like in this intense environment. And the last day she said to me, let's make love. And I was like, brilliant. But it wasn't like the 40 days up. And she goes, no, I mean energetically. And I was like, energetically? What's that mean? I have to penetrate her with my eyes. Make love to her with my heart chakra. Anyway, the next morning she woke up and she said, will you marry me? And I said, yeah. And I thought, wow, I must be so good in bed, like energetically. Yeah. So anyway, we did a Celtic marriage where you marry for a year and a day. Can you see that? Anyway,
see it, yeah.
We went down to Queen Scotia's grave down in Kerry, near outside Tralee. There's Scotia was buried there. Ireland was called Scotia for 300 years. She was an Egyptian queen. I think she was the half sister or wife or both of Tutankhamun. Daughter of Nefertiti, is that correct? Anyway, something like that. The daughter of Nefertiti, who I think was married to Akhenaten, used to be Akhenaten, many gods, changed the name to Aten, son of one god. Anyway, they had some powers, kicked out of Egypt. Don't know the details because it's mythology and history, depends what you believe. But she ended up in Ireland in our stories, and she ended up buried there because she died pregnant in battle. And we went down for a visit. And we did our own little ceremony together. Now, the idea of a Celtic marriage, from what I've read, is it's a year and a day you're together, unless you have a baby in that time. Now, she got herself pregnant. Don't know how she did. She got herself pregnant because she told me about the window. There's a window. Did you know that women have a window? You can only get pregnant. It's only 3 days. You just have to watch the window. Yeah, window of opportunity when you find yourself a good man. We got pregnant, and we'd only been together 3 months, and it was a tiny bit scary, you know, for a moment. And then I realized, well, I'm happy, and she felt safe that I was happy. So we had this powerful experience where we're now pregnant, and we went through that journey. So I suppose that's why I've been a bit quiet for the last year. I've, you know, moved in, fallen in love, moved in with this amazing woman, and we've got pregnant. And then 3 months ago, yesterday, so 3 months and 1 day, you know, we gave birth. But Jerry, as you know, like the last few years have been mad. Like doctors have been telling us that, you know, these little blue face coverings, you know, can stop COVID particles, right? Now they're doctors. So if they believe that, well, maybe they're not really qualified, you know, to be doing anything, right? And if they don't believe it, well, then they haven't, and they're saying it, well, then they have no honor or integrity or self-respect. So you can't really work with someone like that. So how I wouldn't feel safe. Like a friend of mine from Kerry, she gave birth during that time. She wanted to do a home birth, but the way the system is set up for home births, you have to follow the exact rules. And if you don't, your cervix doesn't dilate, blah, 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 or you have these many hours, your midwife cannot help you. You're on your own. You're completely abandoned by the system. So it's either you're completely on your own or it's fully with the system. So there's no middle path. So we said, well, we're not going to play the game. We'll do it ourselves. Well, when I say we, that's what my wife, she's very courageous. She's fit physically and mentally and spiritually. And she felt, she could do it herself. So we had our first child, our child, Faye, after the fairies, because we met in a fairy farm and in the sitting room. So I was the doula, but luckily along my travels, I'd met a woman who used to be a midwife, but she was a whistleblower because back in 2017 up north for the NHS, she said this is pre-COVID, there was a flu vaccine for the flu, and it was allegedly, this is her story, that it was given to a woman who was pregnant and she lost the baby. And she said she'd seen it one time too many, came out about it. So she was at loggerheads with the system. Anyway, she wasn't a midwife, but she is a midwife, as in she's an experienced midwife and she knows what she's doing, but she didn't come as a midwife. She came as a friend and she did nothing. She wasn't even in the room at the time, but she gave us enough preparation, beforehand, so we had the self-belief. Because ultimately, even if a woman is in a coma, she can give birth to a child. If that child's meant to be here, we just need to not get in the way. And there's so much medical intervention and doing this and doing that. Oh, fuck off. What do you really know? Like, just stay out of it. You're only needed if there's a problem. And there's not a problem unless, sometimes you've made the problem. You're fixing the problem you've made, which is often the case. Like, now, there's COVID's a big deal. And now they're going to fix it by locking us in. Hang on a second. You just said it was a big deal. It's a big deal because you put all the old people into homes, and now there's extra old people there under your care, so-called care. So it's anyway, I'm getting a bit caught up on it. I'm just saying we had a beautiful baby, which I half caught the head. I had one job. And then so for the last 3 months we've been hibernating, and I'm just starting to now start gigging again. I'm starting to write again, so I intend on having a new show probably about that. Actually, some bits about that will be in the next 3 months. By springtime I'll use the hibernation period to write a show. So that's for 2022 for me, it's about being a dad, being a father, and having money again, because I haven't been allowed to earn a living in my field, because I was meant to really learn some skills that isn't being a performer anymore. So I started doing comedy gigs. I do try and do about 4 comedy shows. I usually host them in suburb towns, and I bring in big name acts like Dave McSavage, who was sort of one of the acts that talked out about it, not really fully, but a little bit. He started questioning it, which I enjoyed. I respected him for it as well. So he did the last month's shows, and then Deirdre O'Kane or someone might do it. So that'll make enough money then for me to pay the bills, and then to look after wife and baby and myself, and then now I'll start getting creative again. That's the 2023 plan.
Very good. When you round it all up, you've kind of had a great lockdown. I don't know what you're complaining about. You found a wife.
I did actually. I did. Best time of my life. Best time of my life because I was living truth. I was living my truth, and there was difficulties along the way, but not really. For every person who unsubscribed or abused me, or really nice people saying, if I see you I'm gonna puke in your face, or you're like this, and I was like, wow, what's going on here? Such violence, such animosity, such hatred. I didn't take it personally. I'm just a human being who sees something, and I'm holding my truth. And if you have to stoop so low to insult me to defend your truth, well, there's more questions to be asked, right? I'm simply saying I'm not buying into that. This is where I'm at, and I watched what happened. But Jerry, I took it seriously back then. I was getting up in the morning at 4 or 5 in the morning and meditating, because if I was hitting the drink hard, I would have been at the same level, going, well, no, you're a baddie, you're a meanie. we could just turn into a slagging match, but I was trying my best not to do that. I was using Jesus quotes and.
Well, it's clear from what you did. It's your actions show exactly how you navigated through it, and spectacularly well. And I know lots of people that have said that, that have hosted you in their homes and stuff like that, and comment on the fact the light you brought to them, because a lot of people just are in their own little communities and they haven't the opportunity maybe to get out and around. And so when somebody like you came into their lives, it did make a real, like, stuff like that makes a real difference. And like, I suppose looking forward to 2023 is one of the reasons I was chatting to you earlier over the last couple of weeks, is kind of another idea we're hoping to run with next year, is a kind of getting more in touch with our culture, not exclusive. I don't want to sound that it's exclusive, but we're getting more in touch with our own culture, our own arts, our own creativity and spirituality, in a positive sense, not like in an exclusive sense. So I suppose in 2020, actually, one question I wanted to ask you: are you still living in Dalkey?
Yes.
How, like, because it resonated with me there when you said, South Dublin. I looked at the stats on the boosters, was I just 6 months ago, and you're 100% correct. The highest rates of boosting are in Dalkey, Killiney, and the lowest rates in the country are in Blanchardstown and Tala. I went through it, and the country was always, after the initial 2 shots, the countryside faded away down to 50-50 maybe, or less. But I can guarantee you could tell, you could nearly say the most affluent local authority areas in Dublin are also the highest jabbed. It's almost linear, the comparison. So yeah, I don't know why that is. Why? Because they're also allegedly the most educated people in the country. But maybe that's the problem.
Indoctrinated.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting. So,
but saying that, Jerry, I used to do, because after my tour, I felt there was really something in this. I finished 32 counties, and one of the things in my show was about my grandmother, and some of the wisdom she shared with me. And the last show was Westmeath in Fore Abbey, and there was a story about my grandmother, me losing money when I was 11, and it was £200 back then. It was all the money I had, and I was a bit more than 11 actually. It was maybe 13. But anyway, my grandmother had faith, and she brought me to the church, and we prayed, and we looked around Ballymun, because that's where I lost it, and didn't find it. But eventually we ended up going into a spar shop. There was no sign up, but she asked the lady, and I said, I did see something. She looked in the bin, kind of posted no. We rang the number, went to the house, and it was an old elderly couple who had a statue of St. Anthony up there in their house, and handed me the £200.
Wow.
And I was amazed. It was like a real miracle, But I tell the longer version of that story. And on my last gig, which I cancelled, it was the only one I cancelled because my grandmother died that week, And the woman who was helping me with it, she's just a woman who asked me to do it. She said, would you like, no pressure, but if you want, I'll take care of everything, and you can just turn up into, I think it's called Fore Abbey. And I said, great. Turned up, no expectations at all, because I didn't know anyone or anything. Anyway, it was full. It was a beautiful gig. And afterwards, there was a woman there who didn't know about it. And she'd asked one of the other people what was going on. They said, oh, there's a storytelling show. And she said, can anybody come? And they said, yeah, sure, why not? So she came and watched it. And she said that the reason she was going to Fore Abbey was to pray to St. Anthony.
Wow.
Yeah, right. So that was like a little message from my grandmother. But I felt, I was finished the tour, I'm done. I'll take a little break at home. But I felt it was important, the idea of gatherings, for people to gather. So I did them in my house back. I did them in the back garden. I had a marquee. I had like a little marquee, it holds 40, 50 people, maybe a tight squeeze. And I'd invite people. I'd invite my neighbors, regardless of their beliefs. I'd invite my friends, and the ones that went out during lockdown, it was legal. If you believe in that sort of stuff, I believe it was lawful. You know, no harm was done. Street choice, they're all old enough. But it was loud. We had like well-recognized musicians there, some people you've definitely heard of, and they came, and there was poets and storytellers, and there was comedy, and we did it once a month, every month, and the gatherings were great. And I'm in the heart of Dalkey, 1 minute walk from the village. I've got neighbours everywhere. I'm in a council estate, so the houses are all very close. Everybody heard it. Nobody called the cops. So they may be like, you know, jabbed up to the hilt, but they're not rats. Fair play to them.
Tell me about the storytelling aspect. Where did your interest in, like, obviously comedy in a sense is it can be a storytelling exercise, but had you a grow for the old Irish storytelling traditions, or where did that come from?
I suppose I'm often considered a storyteller. A lot of my comedy is stories. And I was always fascinated with storytelling. So about 14 years ago, I went to Emerson College in England, and I did I think it was 4 or 5 months full-time course, and it was great. And then during the lockdown, or the first lockdown, I was like, here, I'm not getting into this. So I went off to Amsterdam, where there's a great storytelling course run by a friend of mine, Raphael Rodin, and I did that one. So I've always found, you know, with comedy, you laugh and you laugh and you laugh, right? So let's say Jimmy Carr, for example, who's considered a great comedian. But after half an hour of just intellectual jokes, just like twists on words, for me, it's not enough. You need something else. So with Tommy Tiernan, for example, often he tells stories and you feel what he feels, or at least I do. I'm always like, he drags me into a world. And I'd consider him like a wild Irishman storyteller, or Ronan O'Shnuddy from Keela. When he tells a story, I could go into it. Or Eddie Lenihan, the storyteller, the Shanachie. I'm always really, by a good storyteller, I really go. I'm taken on a journey. And once I'm connected here, then the laughter is a bonus. Anything that happens, it doesn't have to be like millions of jokes. You just want to be really into something, fully there. And then there's a connection in the room. It's not like just hearing a pin drop. It's like you're taken into a new world. And I think there's a real power in it. A real power, like that you can change the world with a good story.
That's true. So, and I totally agree with you about Tommy Tiernan. And I often think about, I've written about Tommy a few times in my own tin pot way, going back before COVID. And people like him, Sharon Shannon, even the Saw Doctors, there's a certain Irish, you can recognize the DNA of Irish genius in what they're doing. There's almost like a spirit, I don't want to go too, but almost a spiritual connection, is that there's something going on in that room that wouldn't happen in a non-Irish room. An extra special kind of energy. And I've seen Tommy, I don't know, maybe loads of times, but so yeah, I agree with that storytelling aspect. It's funny because Eddie Lenihan, when I was 19, I spent a summer working in Ballyvaughan, and Eddie Lenihan used to be rolled in twice a week as a storyteller, and so 30 years later, he's suddenly cropping up all over the place again. I've come across him 2 or 3 times, and he's still doing his thing. But it was fascinating because he was the first real storyteller I ever heard back in the mid 90s maybe. But so yeah, so a part of your journey, Aidan, has been outside of Ireland. You obviously had the kind of a certain amount of wanderlust at periods of your life. Would that be accurate? Like, would you still be in Malaysia if there was no COVID, do you think?
I would definitely have I'd have a business there, and I'd be back and forth. I'd say I'd probably do it tax-wise, to be honest with you. I'd stay 6 months there and 6 months here, just because that would be in my financial interest. And I'm glad to not be there. I did, look, I was doing a tour. I used to be gigging a lot, so I'd have Adelaide, Perth, Sydney, and I'm missing one of them, Melbourne. So I do all the comedy festivals, and then you'd have Edinburgh and Brighton, and then gigs in Ireland. So I talked to Bob Slayer, an English promoter, and I said, I'm doing like a 6-month tour. And he said, what you need to do is make it a year tour, a year-long tour. And I did. I just thought, yeah, because it sounds good. It's something. It's the real deal. So I turned into a year tour, but I met this French woman on the way in Bangkok, and we were together then for a few years. So I'd go back and forth, back to Ireland, and then to Australia and back, and we were together for a while. But we had different views, and now we're friends, and that's past. But I ended up with this comedy festival and this comedy club in Singapore, but I'm meant to be in Ireland. That's this is my home. Like I've I could travel as far as Scotland or Wales maybe, but I've no interest in going beyond there. Maybe the idea if I could get in a boat to Portugal without any interference, I could go that far. But I don't want to be too far from Ireland. This is where I'm meant to be. It's my home. I love the people. I love the spirit, what's left of it. And yeah, sometimes you have to listen really hard. I used to be really still to feel it. But it's still here. It's still here. I mean, they're doing their best to whatever with it, but they'll never be able to remove that.
No, I don't think that. No, I don't think that's really success. No, I agree with you. I don't think they'll be able to erase it or eradicate it. I think there'll be a reaction at some point, a massive one, and I don't know what form that might take, but we shall see. You mentioned something there, and I should have jumped in earlier when you were an investment banker, right? Were you gigging at that time, kind of on a part-time basis, or was it a complete jump into the dark to go into comedy from that environment?
Well, it was like 2007 at the time when I started comedy.
Right.
I was working in Tokyo at the time as a banker. I paid loads of money, and I had a nice apartment there, paid for by the bank, Bear Stearns. So I only did comedy as a hobby because a lot of the people I worked with were American. And Americans are a lot more confident on the outside than Irish people. We come across like we're mumbling, or our wording isn't it? And it's a lot of like, it's not clear and crisp and confident like an American. So even if I was asked a question and I knew the answer, I'd come across like, oh, sure, I'm not sure, and well, if you ask me, like, I'll give you my best attempt at an answer, like, but we'll get there. And they'd be just looking at me going, who is this clown? So I wanted to learn how to speak clearly and effectively. And I thought those comedian guys, in the local open mic comedy club, they're so good that they can get an entire audience to follow what they're saying, all be paying attention and get the joke at the last moment and laugh, which is instant proof feedback from the audience. And I thought if I could do that and make them all laugh, then I'd be a lot more confident in these meetings that we had. Because I was like, it's kind of like it was like a manager level really I was at, and when I was coming across like a fucking idiot. So literally after like a month or two of it as a hobby, I was infinitely better. Someone asked a question, and if I didn't know the answer, I don't know that answer right now, but I promise you I will by the end of the day, and I will get back to you with the answer to this and any other questions you have. Bang. And that's what they want. They just wanted that confidence. Whereas if I was standing up, because in Ireland, at least for me, standing up in front of an audience meant you're about to be ridiculed and bullied by a teacher who's about to like mock you. So it triggered me into like this blushing and this, I'm going to get, hit or, just told to stand facing a wall in front of my peers who are sneering at me. So standing in front of people wasn't a positive experience, but I changed it. Now it is. I really think that's a serious damage done, the schools, the schooling has done to kids, at least in my time. I hope they still don't behave like that.
Yeah, well, they're doing a different type of damage now, possibly. It's a very it's a very unique solution that you came up to solving that problem. Like if you give what you were trying to achieve in your job to 1,000 people and say, how do I make myself better at this? I'd say maybe only 1 or 2 would come up with, I know what I'll do. I'll go into stand-up comedy. But it's genius. Like it is like it was a genius. And how long after that? Okay, so you're 2007. You're about to hit the tsunami of fucking the financial crash.
Yeah, I packed it in. I was doing my own I had a fight with a boss. I was offered this great job in Hong Kong, which is across the way because my 2-year contract was up in that particular role. And the deal was after 2 years, I could move internally anywhere I want. So I got the job. A trader in Hong Kong, foreign exchange, which is what I was really into. I had one of these small little Sony computers that could fit in my pocket, which sounds not a big deal now because we all have one of these stupid looking spy machines. But at the time, it was top of the range, $3,000. And I was trading like during the day, which I know you're not meant to do, but whatever, they all did. And then anyway, I got this job, but he wouldn't let me go for like another 6 months. So there was like all the senior managing directors and they said, you can't go. And I just went, all right, see you. And I just quit on the spot. And then I decided to go traveling. I did Vipassana meditation, hung out with my friend Joe Jackson, and just went for hikes, mountain, whatever you call it, not hiking, like 12-day hiking, whatever they call it. And traveling to finding myself. I was finding myself, Jerry. See, I was looking everywhere for myself. Turns out I was under the closet in the top.
It's a curious man that you found, isn't it?
Yeah, and then I got into stand-up. For years, to be honest with you, I wasn't very good. I mean, no one is really at the start. Or rarely. There's the odd person who's good. But after a few years with the banking thing, I sort of found my area. When I saw what they were doing to people, wow, it's just a giant scam. They're just taking people's property. And I tried to come across on stage. I have an early show called Take the Red Pill. The first 15 minutes are just a few cock jokes to win them over. But after that, it's really, really, really worth listening to. It's a really good show. It's badly recorded. It's not like, it's my first show. It's my first ever show. So it's not like really high quality, but you get the idea of the content. Like if I did that show now in a Vicar Street or something, that's what I think I still think it's up there with the best of them. But my point is, I was talking about the fear of bankers using fear to trick people into handing over everything they have and more. And back then I was traveling around Ireland doing this tour, and I saw, people who were depressed, and they told me stories about, their partner killing themselves or their neighbor killing themselves because everything they had was taken from them. And their dignity was taken. They were made feel like the bad person. But ultimately, the banks were the ones that got us in this mess. And wasn't by mistake. That's what I knew in my heart. I could never fully prove it, but I was a pawn. I was as low as you could go in the investment banking world. I was just some, copy paste monkey in Tokyo. They can replace me like that. I was on 100 grand plus 50 grand for accommodation. That's nothing to them. The rest of them are on millions, right? So if I could do it, and if I could give a going away speech saying that this place is going to crumble, if I could work that out, then they knew. And the ones that didn't know, whatever, they were just robots. So they knew, and they were doing it anyway. So for me, it was like, well, this is the wealth. The wealth's still there. The wealth is still there. So whose hands is it in now? It was there, and now it's here. So what is that? For me, it was like, let's follow the money. Let's go. But people weren't really interested, they were. Some people were. Like I met one person many years. Actually, I met him on my tour when I was touring again, and he came up to me and he said he saw me back in Cavan in 2013 or something like that. And he told me that his business partner killed himself. And he was strongly tempted to do the same. And he saw my show and he laughed, and it gave him the courage to deal with the banking bullies, because they bully on the phone, but they can only bully you as far as you let them. So I was teaching people through my experience, when they'd ring me and ask for money, what's your name? And I go, well, what did you get for Christmas? And they go, what? And I go, what did you get for Christmas? And they go, I'm not answering that. And I go, well, if you're not willing to answer my very basic question, I'm certainly not going to answer mine. And by the way, my other questions are, well, what's your name? What's your second name? What's your date of birth? And what are you wearing? And I go, listen, if you're going to be offended, you'll be offended. But I'm telling you now, never ring me again. You do not have my consent to ring me again. I owe you nothing, right? And I strongly recommend you look in the mirror and ask yourself, what are you doing, right? So I'd have different answers, but it took me a while to get to the courage to not care what other people think, because in Ireland, we care what other people think. I don't care what you think. You work for a bank. I was your boss's boss 2 years ago. Now I have no money, and you're after me for like an alleged debt, which I don't believe I owe, and I didn't believe I owed at the time because it was. I wrote them letters. They couldn't prove they owned the debt, and I got into this world. And people go, "That's crazy," but it wasn't crazy.
No.
It wasn't crazy, Jerry. You know,
No.
ultimately the wealth was there. It was still there afterwards, but it was in someone else's hands. And I don't care. I was young and confident, and I didn't have a family to feed. But some people felt they had nothing, and they lost their respect. They lost whatever anyway, and they took their own lives. And I'll never forgive the Irish banks or any of the banks for that. For me, like that's. It was murder. It was murder, and it was brutal, and the Irish government allowed it happen. And there's so many good people in Ireland who are trying to keep people in their homes, and the media turn their backs on them. There's no support. There's no like, okay, well, what does our constitution say about this? What's right, what's fair, what's just? It was like, let's just pretend this isn't happening. Why is there so many homeless now? Don't ask that question, whatever you do. And it really hurt me in Ireland, and then I was so proud then when I saw people standing up at the water charges. I had hope again. But that was it. I have hope now. I have it all the time. But that was my introduction in the world of corruption and trickery and everything. I was like, wow, okay, I can't change the world, but I can remind myself what integrity is and follow that. And yeah, sometimes I forget. Wandering off in Asia, setting up comedy festivals in 10 countries that I don't really care about, Yeah, I get lost, but now, who I want to be is the best version of myself in Ireland, doing the right thing, whatever that is, and not get too caught up in the lies, because the lies are going to keep continuing. As long as the victims keep sucking it up. People want to be a victim. The perpetrator, the government's the baddie. No, you're playing the victim. What the government they told you can't travel at 5K and you listen to them. You did that. In your 5K rule. I didn't do it. I traveled to counties I've never been to. I traveled more during that time than I've ever traveled in Ireland. And I put it online, and I didn't hide about it, and I didn't ask for permission, and I didn't cry, and I didn't lie. I just said, this is what I'm doing. This is where I'm going. And if I can do it, everyone can do it. I'm no different than anyone else, except maybe I'm more handsome. But apart from that.
You brought that whole period, because I had a friend that was in that situation where I'm not saying it was the same as yours, but it took him 10 years to he was a solicitor himself, but he wouldn't let it go, and he eventually got out the other side of it. And he used to tell me the stories about people that were coming into him, and he didn't get himself into too much trouble. He had maybe 3 or 4 properties, and like that, banks screaming and roaring, but he dealt with them kind of, it's not dissimilar to the way you did. It was like he kept them on points, and they made loads of not mistakes. They lied on a lot of stuff that they were sending out to people, that people just freaked out. Most people just took the letter and threw it in the big corner and said, okay. But anyway, what I would say is it took 10 years of his life to negotiate. There's a good cohort my age that went through that period, and they were just coming out of it at the start of COVID, and I don't know where they are now, but it was an interesting education if you were smart enough to learn from it, and it sounds like you were.
I watched people. I lost a property out of it. I didn't win, but I won my self of. My property wasn't in the country. I would have put up a bigger fight. I put up a fight for it, but it's a lot easier if you're in the property. and you can lock your gates, and they've got to use violence then, haven't they? You know, you force their hand. But I wasn't in that position. But I had credit card debt and so on. But I watched people successfully keep their house over the years, or at least put on the battle. Not everybody did. You know, there's also other stories. Steve Kerr was a great man at the time, going around videoing and different people. I remember this lovely woman, I won't say her name, and the security people came in. Some were from Ireland, some weren't from Ireland. You know, ex-military people coming in from other countries used to enforce violence. They broke her arm. You know, and that's a woman. She was about 70, I think, at the time.
Yeah, look, sure, there was criminal gangs hired by kind of, like, you know, that's well documented. I suppose I never asked Aidan, what gigs have you coming up, because I wanted to make sure we
I use a comedy site for the gigs that I book other comedians called comedyclub.ie. And the next one I have is in January 20th with Sean. Al Porter is back, and Sean Collins. So they're doing the show. Sean Collins is, you don't know him, but like he's one of the, there's Steve Hughes, Craig Campbell, Sean Collins, and myself. We're the 4 unvaccinated comedians. We're going to do a tour together called the Unjabbed, you know, comedy Unjabbed. It was meant to happen in January. It was meant to be recorded and turned into a thing, but that didn't happen. But Sean, you really like Sean. So January 20th, Sean Collins, Al Porter, and myself will be on in Lucan. And then I don't have things booked except for the Solstice Gathering. There's a Solstice Gathering crew, which is the Conscious Concert. That's on New Year's Eve. I'm doing that. Otherwise, I don't have things booked, but I'm ready now that my baby's 3 months old and my wife's, you know, in control. I'm ready to do gigs. I'll probably do gigs in Ireland, you know, people's houses and stuff like that, barns and kitchens, and, you know, put the hat out at the end of the night. A new show that I'm working on, which I'm excited about. So in about a month, you'll see more of me.
Okay. I'll put links to those sites down in the bottom of the description of the video here. And I suppose we'll finish it up. Aidan, is there anything else that we didn't cover there, or anything else you want to get off your chest?
Yeah, I see that in the background there.
Oh, okay. Oh, the dagger?
Yeah, the dagger I drew, that's the Cleve Solace, the sort of light. And
is that Porrick Pierce?
It is Porrick Pierce, but can you see the table? I'm going to show you something.
Yeah, I can see it, Jack.
You see the famous photograph of Porrick Pierce. In that photograph, he's leaning on a table, and that's the Proclamation of Independence. He went in to get the photograph taken because, well, he knew he was sacrificing himself. But the table he's leaning on is that table.
I go away. Are you serious?
Yeah. Lafayette Photography was my grandfather's. So that's kind of cool, isn't it?
Oh, okay. So
I'll be writing the next show on that.
Wow, that's
looking for inspiration.
Yeah. Look, Aidan, I want to thank you for your time over, especially at Christmas, because you've busy life, home and out gigging last night. So I just thanks for coming on to have a chat with us, and we'll hopefully be seeing you in the near future.
I'm going to be doing a gig at your event in April, hopefully. Looking forward to it.
Definitely. Perfect.
God bless you and all the listeners. Be happy.
Thanks.
Don't be following the rules.